So just before we jump in, I want to do some quick introductions. I'm Sarah Garvin. I'm an independent contractor working with Amy Witt and as our consulting on various projects, but mostly reviewing coastal construction projects and their potential impacts on species listed as threatened or endangered under the U.S. Endangered Species Act, which we call the ESA. So the ESA is exactly why I know today's blog guest, Calusa Horn. We're former colleagues from when I worked at NOAA Fisheries Southeast Regional Office a decade ago, and currently works there now. And she's just a fantastic human being that I'm excited to talk to again. She has a heart full of compassion for all of Earth creatures and critters, including sad, lost little squirrels that she brings into the office sometimes to rehab. And as an Indigenous woman, which is, a big piece of who Calusa is, she has a deep commitment to advocating for the environment and Indigenous rights. So without further ado, let's learn a little bit more about you, Calusa, and where you're working and what you're doing.
Okay. So again, my name is Calusa Horn. I work at NOAA Fisheries, Southeast Regional Office, but I work in the Protected Resources Division that primarily works to implement the ESA and Marine Mammal Protection Act as well. To review and protect threatened and endangered species. And essentially the end job is to prevent extinction and promote recovery. So that is generally the big overview of protected resources. But me specifically, go ahead.
No, and so you've kind of got your fingers in a lot of different pots, it sounds like.
Right, so I wear several different hats. Currently, I'm a recovery coordinator for oceanic white-tip sharks and giant manta rays. So we're working, those are species that are both been listed recently under the Endangered Species Act as threatened. We're working on developing recovery plans and actions and implementing research efforts to further understanding of those two species and promote their recovery and hopefully, get them off the list one day so they'll be recovered and no longer declining.
So, most of our audience is, middle-aged girls and young women looking to jump into science a little more deeply. But when you talk about recovery, can you kind of explain a little bit more about what that means for endangered and threatened species?
So when a species is listed under the Endangered Species Act, the Act actually requires us to develop plans, actions, tangible things that we can do as scientists and managers to increase the number of that particular animal or species in the environment. So we mitigate threats, we work on better understanding research and the animal's life history, we work in protecting habitats. In the end, all of that stuff is written up in a recovery plan. So the end game is to get the species on an upward trajectory as far as their abundance and their habitats and all of those type of things. So when we say recovery, the ultimate goal of the Endangered Species Act is to remove those species from the list because they have been recovered. Does that help?
No, that's awesome. So that kind of means you're like this hub for, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you're kind of this hub for talking to scientists and talking to nonprofits who are down on the ground working with the species. You're working with government organizations that are managing the species or permitting work that's done in the species habitat.
Right.
So
right. there's a host of things, and that you do this, have done this before, with Section 7 of the Endangered Species Act, and looking at construction and other large activities that happen in the marine environment that may affect species, and we're constantly trying to mitigate that risk or remove that risk. And we also do funding, like another hat that I wear. I work the Species Recovery Grant Coordinator for the Southeast region. And this is a huge grant program that we where we provide resources and to states to further research and study these listed species. So several different things, lots of different hats, but yes.
Yeah, so your
I hope
current
that answered the question.
job title doesn't really encapsulate everything that you do, because we've kind of smushed the first two questions that I have together.
I wish that, yeah, and another thing is that I review species for listing under the Endangered Species Act. So this is actually a pretty significant portion of my job right now. So if we get petitioned by an NGO or anybody really to look and review a species for whether it needs protection under the ESA, I typically will review those species and do the assessments to determine whether those species warrant listing under the Endangered Species Act. And then subsequently we'll publish findings and rules if the action is warranted to protect those species. So right now, for instance, I'm working on a queen conch review for under the ESA.
Do you get to do any site visits for that one?
Not yet. I mean, it really just depends on which way it goes. If we end up listing the species, I could definitely foresee some field work in my future. If not, we'll just continue to work on conservation efforts with our national partners and fisheries resource managers.
Yeah, so kind of you're more in the policy arena in terms of like taking the field work that folks are doing and turning that into not only language that managers can understand, but the general public can understand too.
I do a lot of writing and analysis and assessments and plain language and translating, some pretty dense scientific documents sometimes into rules and regulations that the public can understand as well.
Yeah, I imagine a real creative process sometimes.
It can be challenging.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's see, where are we here in my list of questions? So when did you know that this is what you wanted to do? I don't know that any of us went into this work within the Endangered Species Act knowing we wanted to go into it. It kind of, I feel like a lot of it for many of us grew out of just our interests, and then also trying to carve out a paying gig somehow.
Right. Sure.
So maybe just describe your path a little bit of how you ended up here.
Okay. So ever since I was younger, since it's really as long as I can remember, part of it is being an Indigenous woman and, having been raised with the philosophy that, we are stewards of the earth, the water, all the critters that live in it. So I always knew from early in my life that I wanted to work towards conservation and protection. I think it's really important that we provide a voice to our resources, our species, all the animals. So for me, I always knew that I wanted to work in the conservation and arena, and when I started going and getting more focused in my degree, I did pick up policy quickly, because it's a way to really use writing to create rules that protect our environment. And I thought that would be the best way for me to move forward and make a difference. So, I mean, it really started when I was very young, and it definitely got, more focused, throughout my career or throughout school. But really, I knew I wanted to work in conservation at a very young age. And, marine biology just came naturally, being raised in Florida and being very close to the beach and, spending so much time on the water, I just always knew that I wanted to work, in the Gulf of Mexico on all the critters that, I see on a regular basis and, protect those resources.
Yeah, yeah. And for me, I think too, just the combination of getting all the science, but not having to do all the necessary, maybe lab experiments or data crunching or kind of, but actually applying that science and seeing, achievable results or seeing information get transferred to people was a draw for me for what we do with the ESA. I don't know if that was the same for you, just,
Yeah, you know, taking the science or even like steering, scientists and academia and our partners to answer important, management questions so we can, in, develop laws and rules and regulations to, protect is, whoa, I don't know what that was.
I think that was my text message. Sorry. They're integrated and it's really annoying me.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, no, that is exactly it. And I think that, a lot of people think of marine biology and, environmental studies as, being out in the field and doing, all the field work and, pulling nets and doing all of that fun stuff, getting dirty. But for us, for me, majority of my time is spent in the office, reading and writing and implementing, case law and reading different policy decisions and that type of thing. So it's a lot of work and a lot of brain power, but it means a lot in the end.
Yeah.
It has a lot of significant impact, I think.
I agree. Yeah. And it's never boring. I feel like there's always something new to learn in applying the ESA to different species. So
And that's one of the cool things about my job, it's like I do predominantly oceanic white-tip and giant manta ray, very focused on them, but through like doing species reviews under the SA for listing and stuff, I've done everything from a seahorse to a whale to a conch. And so, I'm constantly learning about, different species and different habitats. And I think that keeps it really alive and active. So
yeah.
it's very
Yeah. And getting that new science in your hands too keeps it fresh. So one question that's not on our list, but is very specific to you is just describe a little more about your Indigenous heritage and how you grew up. And
So I'm an enrolled member of the Red Lake in Minnesota.
can you say that one more time? It froze on my screen.
Oh, no. Okay, so I'm an enrolled member of the Red Lake Band of Ojibwe natives in Minnesota. That's where my people are from. My mom is from Minnesota. My dad is, oh dang, I'm not gonna remember. We'll talk about my dad some other time. But my mom is Ojibwe and my dad is Ottawa, I believe. I have to look that up. Oh God, I'm gonna be in trouble. We are a patriarchal society, so that makes sense. Yeah, that's where my people come from. My family is mostly in Minnesota right now. They're very active in the Native community up there. My dad has written multiple books on Native American culture and philosophy, and really it is like the bedrock. It's my grounding, force of who I am and, why I think for the most part I've ended up where I've ended up and why I keep on doing it.
Well, and your name has a particular meaning too in terms of Indigenous culture as well, right?
Right. So my parents named us three children. I have two siblings. Um, were named after extinct Indian tribes. Calusa, Ihasha, and Carissus. I named my daughter after an extinct Indian tribe. I think that not only are the names beautiful and different, but I've never met another Calusa, so that's always fun. But it reminds us of where we come from, and kind of the struggles that Native and First Nation people have had to endure.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Struggles. No, no singular
Yeah,
thing and no small thing. And we'll
right.
kind of circle back to that in a minute. But um, so we talked about what you do and how you got there, and you have a spouse and you have a daughter. So how do you maintain that work life balance? How do you make sure that you're out in the environments that you love? Um,
Right. So it's definitely, I think the last year has been a challenge because, as you can see, I have been home since March of 2020. I'm working from home and trying to juggle, my young daughter and work life and two dogs, and but it's working. It's definitely not standard, but we're balancing. Really, I think the most important thing for us is to get outside and enjoy some of the natural wonders of Florida, like our springs and beaches, and we have some beautiful places here, and we're really fortunate to have access to them, especially now during this time when we're all kind of cooped up.
yeah,
um,
yeah.
but yeah, pretty much what I do. I hang out with my daughter, and she makes me happy. Watching her learn and engage with the world is just it's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, so cool. Um, yeah, this year I think a lot of people have relearned the importance of the outdoors, and I really hope that people take those lessons to heart and maybe do a little more in their personal time to help protect those places.
For sure. You can always participate in the coastal cleanup. You just go out and you pick up garbage.
Exactly, exactly. Yep, just bring your bag with you,
Bring
and
your bag. I do it every single time I go to the beach.
there's always a cigarette butt to find or a little piece of plastic. Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Um, what is the one thing you wish you had known before you started pursuing your career?
Oh, I a hard one. I made a joke earlier, that I wouldn't have taken all those algebra and stats classes if I knew I was going to end up writing so much. Um,
Right?
you know, I don't. It's hard to say. I don't really know. I guess you'll see a theme in this, but like I think it's going back to being confident in yourself and wishing that I would have had more confidence in myself going in, and being more assertive and demanding in what my career and my choices, the choices that are available to me.
Right, right. It's hard to know until you're in it though, right?
Yeah, right. It is, and like yeah, you don't really know what you're gonna need until you're in it. And so I mean it's hard. I had a hard one. I had a hard time answering this question.
Would you say that you had a good support system around you to help navigate, moving through your career, or did you have mentors?
You know, I can't like I think about my background and how I ended up here. It's hard. I worked three jobs while I went to school. I had to take out student loan debt. I, pretty much was self-made and was fortunate enough to get an internship when I started, in all of this. And I was ended up, scoring a pretty awesome job. But I didn't, there were no mentorships, like, things like that for me.
Well,
I
right.
came
You were
from,
just kind of
I didn't have I know.
following your interests, and just
Mhm.
kind of it kind of worked out in a
For
way
sure.
that, yeah.
It
um,
did work out for me, and, and it goes to the whole point of, you just have to be persistent and keep on trying.
yeah, and knowing what you are truly interested in and following those interests,
For
without
sure.
is is key, I think. Um, let's see. One challenge can you describe that you've overcome in your work or your personal life?
Um,
Just one.
that's one.
No.
Uh,
Like anyone has just one.
and I think my biggest challenge that's personal and has to do with my work life, is it took me a really long time to find my voice and to be confident in myself and my decision making. And so unfortunately, I think that, the more I've been ingrained in my career and the longer I've been there, the more confident I've gotten. But I think that there's definitely a confidence gap when it comes to women and some of the challenges we face, unfortunately. So for mine, it was definitely overcoming um, my
Your
insecurity.
self-doubt. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and finding my voice and becoming assertive, confident, you know decision maker, and implementer of the USA.
Right? Yeah, for sure. Um, what is one of your greatest memories from your career so far? And gosh, you've been doing this now for 20 years, right?
Oh no, no. It's been about 15 years. It's been
Yeah.
about 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I have a couple. Not all are great, but they definitely changed my life. Um, I think one of my most recent best memories is, going on a first research trip for giant manta rays, and just being in the water with them and being able to engage with them and see them in their environment. They're just beautiful animals, and they are really cool. And it was I consider myself blessed to have be able to have those moments. And then policy wise, like, I think the biggest thing for me was the first time I published a rule listing a species under the Endangered Species Act. That was huge. I don't think a lot of people get to do that. And so for me, that was a huge deal. And it was a milestone to be able to extend those protections to a species that was in such drastic need of them. And hopefully in the end game, they'll be able to not go extinct. Um, one
Well,
of the biggest things, though, I have three. So,
yeah, no,
the
that's awesome.
biggest thing, yeah, the most life-changing thing that I have done since I've been with NOAA Fisheries was definitely Deepwater Horizon oil spill. When I was stationed at the Mobile Incident Command Center in Alabama, pretty much that whole summer, and that changed my life. That changed just it. It was hard, and it was sad, and it was definitely changed my view of the world, and really validated why I took up this job and this career. But it definitely changed it. It wasn't for it, good and bad. But yeah, that was definitely a life-changing experience, being at the Mobile Incident Command Center.
For sure. And hopefully it's a once in a lifetime experience, for all of us, because that was rough. Um,
Yeah.
and I
Well, we can
know
hope.
I was in the Homa Command Center just a couple of times, just a couple of rotations, and
Mhm.
I know that the Mobile Command Center was just a rodeo of
Yeah.
I just have this image in my head of like a busy newsroom of just, running from one part of the command center to
Right.
another, just trying to fight for your species, for the sea turtles, for the dolphins, for the whales, and
Mhm.
um, hoping to ensure that we could minimize the damage. So
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was hard. You remember, turtles and birds and marine mammals, sharks, rays, like, even the crabs, like, the water, it was just all very devastating
yeah.
um, for the ecosystem and, those that were there to try to minimize the recovery or
Right,
minimize,
right. And
right?
having to work with all those different people too, and not always the same people because people were rotating in and out. So um,
Right.
that's another piece I think
Yep.
of your job that isn't immediately thought of, but that interpersonal and communication and collaboration skills
For
that you
sure.
got to have to work with all these different agencies and scientists and managers and lawmakers.
Yes. It's definitely a skill set, not one that probably gets a lot of focus because you do it every day, but there is definitely a skill set that goes along with communicating this stuff to different audiences.
Right, and kind of having to negotiate for a species because you're the face of the species at the table.
Negotiation and avocation. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, so this is a bit of a two-parter, getting towards the end of our questions here, but um, one, have you ever faced gender-related challenges in your career? And two, if you have, how did you deal with those challenges?
Gender related challenges. I think yes. Um, I do think that I have had to deal with a feeling of boys club at different points in my career. I work with a majority of men and have always worked with men. Um, I I how do you go through those challenges? I think that it's handling it with the person depending on the offense.
Yeah.
you know, being vocal and voicing your discomfort are about a comment or something like that if it's ever made, making sure that it's known that that type of attitude is not acceptable. And then, worst case scenario, you got to go up the chain.
Right.
And
Right.
that's typically, how I handle those situations.
Have you had to go up the chain?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah.
Because it's scary, and
It,
I feel like it's a scenario where you're on the defensive from the beginning,
yeah.
and yeah. Have so the ones that you have had to put up the chain, have they resolved well for you or not so much?
Uh,
Was there a resolution?
there was a resolution,
Yeah, yeah.
and I am currently happily employed. So yes.
Okay. That's all we needed to know. The
Mhm.
system worked for you.
The system does work. The
Good.
system does. You just have to make sure that you know, you articulate your concerns about any type of behavior like that is unacceptable, and that you make it known at the point in time and into the future that that's unacceptable. that's how I. That's how I went. My being older now
Right.
and having more experience dealing with these type of situations. Um, now, like for sure, that would be the document, be vocal about your discount, and then yeah,
Yeah.
record it.
And just for context, in terms of, working at NOAA Fisheries is, it it grew out of a culture of, you know, fishing,
Yeah,
which is male dominated, and it's it's a profession out in the field, and if, it's going fishing with your guys. So that kind of
well,
was, I'm just saying, like, in terms of the culture of where NOAA Fisheries started and like who was in those roles, and where we are now in 2021,
right.
I still think there's some residual stuff from those beginnings with just being crude and crass, and
Yeah,
just fishers out on the boat, but that has changed over time. And, you know,
for
tell me
sure.
from, yeah,
There
so from your
are
perspective,
a lot
like,
of and instruments, I guess, for lack of a better, tools in place to prevent this type of thing from happening in NOAA fisheries for sure.
yeah,
Um,
and the culture, like the overarching culture is not supportive of that as much any longer. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
like there is a zero tolerance.
yeah. So that's really been good to see, even
Mhm.
since my time there, but to know that the system's working for you,
Yeah.
and
Mm,
that you feel comfortable
this
dealing
is out
with.
for the breath of my career too, not,
Right, right.
you know,
So,
whatever.
and it's sad that it takes more experience to get better at handling it. But
Well, when you first start off, as like an intern or, you don't know the ropes, you don't know, you don't want to make waves.
yeah,
Just want to, do your job and do a good job. And,
right, right,
that there are situations where, things have happened that were inappropriate,
right.
whether it's a conversation or, touch on the shoulder or whatever. It's just, I think that unfortunately now there's a lot more understanding, but I think, 10 years ago, maybe not so much.
So that's really good for our girls to know that are listening to this or reading this, that, um, maybe head into your career with a very strong sense of yourself,
Mhm.
or at least your interests, and advocating for yourself, but also knowing that NOAA Fisheries as a potential path supports women facing these challenge is just a good thing to know for girls entering.
Right. NOAA Fisheries is very supportive of women, getting women in science, minoritized women in science, and protecting against these type of situations. They are pretty good about that.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really good to hear. So yeah, that kind of brings us into our last question, which is just what kind of advice would you offer to girls and young women wishing to pursue kind of a similar career in policy or advocacy?
Right. It's so funny. I had so many things like don't ever, give up, keep on trying, never stop learning, all those type of things. But really, I think in the most basic thing that I can guidance that I would suggest next grade is get internships.
Yeah,
Internships and networking, to understand better about what fields within the biology field or science, that you want to go into, making those connections with colleagues and or people that could become your colleagues, and those type of things are essential, especially in this type of really competitive field. And then, don't underestimate yourself.
right.
You just be confident. Don't underestimate your ability to, succeed and to do things, the best. And so that's pretty much it. I mean, really get internships and don't ever underestimate yourself.
So kind of position yourself to take advantage of opportunities or people that you meet, and just being curious and voicing that curiosity
For
can
sure.
really lead to opening up opportunities.
Absolutely. You got to get your foot in the door. Getting your foot in the door, having the developing those, connections and relationships with other biologists, and, figuring out what you want to do, asking questions, that type of thing. Like, you have to engage, and you have to try, like, you have to do it. Nobody's going to do it for you.
Right. And no one's going to help you unless they know you're interested.
Right.
So voicing
Right.
that interest, asking those questions,
For
seeking out the things that intrigue you or pique your
Mhm.
curiosity, will help flow your career or interests in a more positive direction.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, well, this has been so fun because we haven't been able to catch up in so long, and I feel like I never even left the office.
I know, isn't it crazy?
Uh,
I'm
so this has been great. And are there any parting things that you'd like to share for folks that want to learn more about the ESA or
And I always say, feel free to go to NOAA's website. There's a wealth of information there about, Endangered Species Act, what we do, what species we have, what we're doing to, recover them. And, other than that, I just want to thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah,
It's been
thanks so
fun.
much for agreeing to be on here. And I'll post some of the links that you sent me,
Mhm.
so folks can click on that in the transcript. But this has been super great, and I hope you have a fantastic day. I kind of wish it was a Friday.
I I gotta go and I gotta get on a conch call right after this.
Okay, well, I will let you skedaddle and prepare for that, but thank you again, and we'll have to chat again soon.
All right. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you later.
All right, bye, Calusa.
Bye.